They say the world can be a dark place, filled with unexpected twists, but nothing prepares you for a moment like this. A winding dirt road stretched out like an ancient scar through the heart of a thick forest. Sunlight slashed down between the trees, casting flickering shadows across the ground. It was there, on that lonely path, where a drifter named Clara found herself wandering, grappling with her own demons. A backpack slung over her shoulder, she moved with purpose, her worn boots crunching lightly against the gravel. Sometimes life's burdens weigh heavier than any pack. Clara had learned that the hard way. A year of running from memories that clung to her like cobwebs. She thought she had seen everything, felt it all, and yet nothing could prepare her for what she was about to discover. As she rounded a corner, a sound cut through the tranquil chirping of birds, a faint, high-pitched wail. At first she paused, thinking it was just her imagination playing tricks, but the cry grew louder, insistent, pulling at the edges of her consciousness. With a furrowed brow, she took a cautious step toward it, each footfall echoing like a heartbeat in the stillness. There, just off the path, shadows cloaked the ground in darkness as if they could swallow her whole. And there, amidst the underbrush, she saw it, a small bundle swaddled in tattered fabric. Confusion washed over her. It didn't make sense. She strained her eyes, trying to make sense of the scene playing out before her. It was a baby. A tiny infant, no more than a few months old, nestled against the still form of a woman. A sobering stillness hung in the air, thickening the silence that enveloped them both. Clara's heart raced, fists clenching at her sides. What had happened here? She could see the mother's lifeless face, serene yet heart-wrenching. It was clear that this woman had not gone quietly. Fighting the urge to look away, Clara bent down, her breath catching in her throat. Tears streamed down the baby's cheeks, pooling in the fabric beneath her. This wasn't some story she could turn away from. This was real, raw, and heartbreaking. The baby gazed up at her, eyes wide and brimming with fear, confusion, and an instinctual sense of abandonment. It was a moment that would etch itself into Clara's mind, resonating with her own buried sorrow. She whispered, her voice trembling in the stillness. The baby's cries echoed like thunderclaps, shaking her to the core. Clara glanced around, half expecting someone to emerge from the shadows, but she remained alone with the haunting scene. She had spent years running from pain, yet here was this little life, clinging to existence in the most tragic of circumstances. 1,000 thoughts rushed through her mind, a cacophony of panic, dread, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Was she strong enough to help? Real life didn't come with a user manual. There were no guidelines on what to do in such dire straits. Clara could feel her heart shattering, piece by piece, as the baby continued to wail. It was the sound of desperate hope, tiny fists that seemed to reach out for someone to hold them, to care for them. The drifter remembered her own childhood, a montage of fleeting moments wrapped in fragile joy before everything fell apart. An empty house, echoes of laughter replaced by shouts and tears. "I can't leave you here," she murmured, feeling an inexplicable connection to this tiny being. It was as if the universe had intertwined their fates in that very instant. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a stark contrast to the tragedy surrounding them. Clara took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. It was a decision that felt monumental, like standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into the unknown. "I won't abandon you." With gentle hands, she scooped the baby into her arms, cradling the fragile head against her chest. The tiny body trembled against her, as if seeking warmth in the void. Clara felt a swell of emotion crashing over her, a tide of protectiveness mingled with uncertainty. She knew she couldn't stay in that grim clearing forever, but the path ahead felt both thrilling and terrifying. They were a mismatched pair, a restless drifter and an orphaned baby, both searching for a safe harbor in the storm. Underneath the weight of the raw, aching reality, Clara felt a fire ignite within her. The flicker of a promise, a commitment to protect this child against the darkness that had already claimed too much. As she started down the path, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced with the trees, and every step felt monumental. It was more than a physical journey. It was a break from the past, a chance to forge a new path. Clara's mind raced with possibilities. They needed to find shelter, food, warmth, everything a tiny life required. The streets she had once roamed freely now felt menacing, full of lurking dangers. She thought about calling the authorities, but hesitation gripped her. What if they separated them? What if this precious life became just another statistic, just another forgotten child lost to the system? As night enveloped the forest, it wrapped around her like a cloak, both suffocating and protective. The baby shifted in her arms, quieting as if sensing Clara's resolve. With every step, the weight of responsibility weighed heavier, but so did the fervor of purpose. Clara stumbled into a small town half an hour later, a place she thought she'd only read about in novels. A quaint village dotted with rustic homes and a flickering street lamp that stood like a beacon of hope. It felt surreal after the stark wilderness that had almost swallowed her whole. The smells of fresh bread and warmth wafted through the air, teasing her senses. Yet, even in this moment, the underlying fear remained. She murmured aloud, glancing down at the baby nestled against her chest. The child's face was serene, albeit smeared with remnants of tears. It felt like a world of emotion, of possibility, lay in that tiny form. As she ambled through the quiet streets, her eyes caught sight of a small diner, its neon sign buzzing like a heartbeat. The windows glowed softly, a warm invitation amidst the chill. Clara pushed the door open, and as the bell chimed overhead, she stepped inside, feeling vulnerable and exposed. Barely anyone turned to look, but Clara's heart pounded in her ears. It felt as if every gaze was piercing through her, questioning her sanity. She released a shaky breath, not wanting to stand out, not wanting to draw attention. She slid into a booth at the farthest corner, cradling the baby close to her chest. The waitress approached, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, an apron tied around her waist. She asked, her voice warm. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but realized she could only manage a nod. How was she supposed to explain the child in her arms? How could she even begin to touch the world that had just come crashing down? As the waitress poured coffee into a chipped mug, Clara looked down at the baby, who had fallen asleep, her tiny breath soft and rhythmic. The relief washed over her like a wave, but it was soon drowned under the weight of anxiety. What would she do? Where would they go? A few minutes later, the diner's door swung open, and two men in work clothes entered, laughing loudly, their voices echoing off the walls. Clara shrank down, instinctively tucking the baby closer, urgency prickling her skin. But as they jokingly debated the best fishing spots, she couldn't help but catch snippets of their lives. A raw, uncut glimpse of normalcy, a world she had momentarily lost touch with. "Look, I know this is crazy," she finally found the courage to speak when the waitress returned, a frown etched on her forehead. Her voice trembled. The woman's eyes widened, and for a moment Clara saw a flicker of understanding pass between them. "You did the right thing by bringing her in," the waitress said softly, forming her next words with careful consideration. "Help." The word echoed in her mind, a beacon shining through the fog of her thoughts. "I know," she admitted, choking on the confession. I can't leave her." A moment of silence loomed between them, a heavy pause that carried the weight of two lives intertwining against unfathomable odds. The waitress reached out, her hand gentle, but Clara flinched, a reflex cultivated through years of learning to guard her heart. Before she could retreat, the woman smiled, compassion radiating from her. It was an invitation to release the burden she had carried all alone. "You can stay here." A warmth blossomed in Clara's chest, blooming against the cold reality that had clouded her for so long. She looked down at the sleeping baby, and tears pooled in her eyes. Perhaps the universe wasn't as cruel as she had believed. In that moment, surrounded by strangers who were quickly becoming allies, Clara felt something shift deep within. Her journey, once so solitary, now seemed full of possibilities. Perhaps she wasn't as lost as she had thought, and maybe, just maybe, she could offer this child a life filled with love, a life different than the one they had just escaped. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the night wrapped around them warmly, merging their fates like the interwoven threads of a tapestry. A new chapter awaited, promises yet to be written, to souls once lost, now found in unexpected unity. In the heart of a dense forest, not far from a winding dirt road, a piercing cry pierced the stillness of the air, a sound that shattered the quiet, an echo of a desperate, raw need. Clara, a drifter with a heavy heart and an even heavier backpack, wandered through the trees, usually lost in her own thoughts. Today, however, the cries pulled her out of her own sadness, setting her senses alight. Something was not right. The path twisted ahead, flanked by bushes and tall oaks, their limbs like gnarled arms reaching for the sky. Clara paused, feeling the weight of the moment hang in the air. The cries grew louder, and curiosity wrestled with fear in her gut. She took a cautious step forward, her worn boots crunching against the dry leaves. What she stumbled upon was a scene etched forever in her memory. A small bundle was nestled beside a lifeless woman, who lay still against the earth as though she had simply fallen asleep. Clara's breath caught in her throat, pulse racing, real dread curling like smoke in her lungs. The baby, no older than a few months, wailed desperately, tiny fists flailing helplessly. Clara breathed, moving closer. The baby's face was streaked with tears, wide-eyed and panicked, conveying an urgency that cut through the silence like a knife. It was heart-wrenching, a gut punch of despair. The woman's face, serene in death, seemed almost peaceful, but Clara could see the truth. This woman had fought to the end. The baby's cries, full of life, were a stark contrast to the stillness of the mother beside her. Their fates lay tangled together in that desperate moment. Clara knelt, her heart racing. She whispered, but the woods offered no answers, only the distant rustle of leaves and the steady, heartbreaking wail of the baby. Tension gripped her chest as she glanced around, half expecting someone to emerge from the shadows to explain it all. But it was just her and this child, alone in a world that felt unbearably cruel. The urge to flee was fierce. She had spent years running from pain herself. But as Clara looked down at the baby, its little face wrinkled with fear and confusion, something shifted deep within her. It was a connection she couldn't explain, a knot of responsibility tightening in her gut. She couldn't walk away. Not now, not ever. "I won't leave you," she promised softly, cradling the baby gently in her arms. As she lifted the tiny form, it was a spark igniting a fire long thought extinguished. The weight of the world felt monstrous, yet within it lay a flicker of hope. Clara's heart raced as she stood, uncertainty mixing with a new determination. This baby needed her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she had something to fight for. Far beyond her own struggles, here was a life hanging in the balance, a chance to rewrite both of their stories. As she stepped away from the grim scene, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that danced across the path ahead. Every step away felt monumental, a break from the past and an uncertain leap into a future she couldn't comprehend. The forest loomed around her, alive and thriving, but all she could see were the horrors that had just unfolded. The road led her to a small town, nestled against the forest's edge, half lit by the fading sun. Clara felt out of place among the modest houses and rustling lawns, her ragged clothes juxtaposed against the neatness around her. But she pressed forward, clutching the baby tightly. She thought of calling anyone, but the idea of involving authorities made her stomach turn. The world outside was chaotic enough. She didn't want this child to be another statistic, lost among desolate numbers. As she wandered through the streets, she finally spotted a diner tucked away at the end of the block, a warm light peeking through the window like a beacon. The smell of coffee wafted gently into the night, as did the laughter of diners, a stark contrast to the tragedy Clara had just escaped. Stepping inside felt like crossing an invisible barrier. The bell chimed and heads turned. She felt their eyes assess her, their curiosity a weight pressing down. A waitress approached her, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes that radiated warmth. She asked, her voice soothing. Clara nodded, her throat dry, unable to voice the panic swirling within her. She slid into a booth, the leather cracked and well-worn. As she settled in, she felt the baby begin to stir in her arms, tiny whimpers bubbling to life again. She pressed her fingers against the baby's cheek, and it seemed to calm at her touch, its little face relaxing under her warmth. The waitress returned with a steaming cup, her gaze dropping to the baby. She asked, the concern palpable. For a heartbeat, Clara hesitated. "No, I found her," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Her mother is." Tears threatened to fall again, but she swallowed hard, refusing to let them spill. The waitress's expression softened, and in that moment Clara recognized the flicker of understanding in her eyes. "You did the right thing bringing her here," the waitress assured her gently. With simple words, but they struck a chord deep within Clara. She looked down at the baby, whose eyes were now glistening as if they were searching her for reassurance. "I can't leave her," Clara confessed, her voice trembling. "I can't." The weight of her promise held her steady. The waitress nodded slowly, her brow furrowing as if contemplating her next words carefully. "There are shelters, people who can help, but you need to trust someone," she said, pulling the diner's phone book from its resting place. As Clara watched the waitress pull out a pencil and paper, something in her chest began to thaw. She felt vulnerable, yes, but also filled with a warmth she hadn't known in years. The idea of reaching out, of allowing someone in, felt terrifying yet utterly necessary. "There's a place not far from here," the waitress continued, her voice unwavering. "They help children like her." Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing, a lifeline thrown to her in the middle of a storm she thought she'd have to weather alone. She took down the information, heart racing at the possibility of a better future. Maybe they could heal together, her and this little life who had already weathered so much pain. Just as Clara was about to gather the strength for next steps, two men in work clothes entered the diner, laughing and joking, their voices echoing off the walls. Clara instinctively tucked the baby closer to her chest, suddenly aware of her own fragility in contrast to their merriment. One of the men asked, pausing as he caught sight of her. His jovial expression shifted, curiosity taking over. "No," Clara muttered, afraid of the scrutiny. It felt like her heart was being laid bare. The waitress stepped in, swift and protective. "She just found this little one." Her mother, the men grew quiet, their laughter fading as the somber nature of the moment settled over the diner. Clara felt exposed, every eye now focused on her, and in that instant she considered fleeing again. But something held her steady, the unfathomable sadness they all must have felt. The men exchanged looks of concern, and in that moment, Clara realized she wasn't just a drifter carrying a burden. She was part of a community, even if only for a moment. The specter of grief connected them all, a lifeline strung between hearts that beat for each other even in the dark. The men addressed her softly now, their laughter replaced by genuine questions. "You're okay?" Clara could only nod, her throat tight. "No," she corrected herself suddenly, passion igniting. "I will." The diner plunged into silence, and she felt a warmth of fierce courage blossoming within her. As the baby cooed and curled her tiny fingers around Clara's thumb, she realized that she was building a bridge piece by precious piece. "Let's get you both some food," the waitress said, her voice a soothing balm. Clara didn't argue. As the waitress left to fetch a plate of food, she pulled the baby closer, cradling her small body, feeling the natural weight of a life she had once thought was too small and fragile to hold. In that moment, it didn't matter that Clara had her flaws or fears. This little being needed love, safety, and a home. Each bite of food was a reminder that she was strong enough to nourish not just herself, but this tiny life too. The world had been so heavy for so long, but now everything hinted at something new unfurling, like leaves breaking through the frost of winter. A connection formed with the waitress as she shared her struggles, and slowly she began to see what it meant not just to survive, but to truly live. As Clara stepped outside the diner with the baby safe in her arms, the night wrapped around them, but it felt different. And for the first time, Clara felt clouds lifting from her heart. No longer just a drifter lost in her own grief, she walked with purpose, each step echoing with the quiet promise she had made. Together, they would face the world. Together, they would find their way through the darkness. The journey had just begun, and within it lay hope, resilience, and a bond that could never be broken. The tiny hand gripped her finger securely, and Clara knew in that moment that this little girl would never again cry alone. The early morning mist hung low in the forest, shrouding the trees in a ghostly veil. Birds chirped softly, their songs blending seamlessly into the tranquil symphony of nature. It was serene, peaceful, until the silence was abruptly shattered by a haunting cry, an innocent wail that echoed into the trees. Clara, a drifter searching for purpose, stumbled onto a narrow path that wound through the wilderness. She carried the weight of her past, a heavy backpack filled with tattered memories and unfulfilled dreams. Today, however, the cries drew her in like a moth to a flame. Each desperate note tugged at her heartstrings, pulling her closer to the source. With each step, the air thickened around her, a mix of foreboding and instinct guiding her deeper into the woods. Her heartbeat quickened, a wild rhythm pounding in her chest. Could someone be in trouble? The anxiety clawed at her throat as she pushed through the underbrush, careful to watch her footing, but the cries grew louder, sharper, an urgent plea for help. Then she saw it. Just off the path, the earth seemed to cradle a small bundle against a figure. A woman sprawled on the ground, life extinguished in an instant. Clara gasped, a jolt of horror rippling through her. The woman lay still, her face frozen in a state of peace that contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding her. Clara's eyes widened, and her heart sank as she focused on what was truly important. Tucked against the woman's side was a baby, a tiny, fragile creature, swaddled in what looked like a soiled blanket. The baby's cries cut through the quiet, raw and desperate, a sound filled with fear and confusion. Clara knelt down, her heart racing. "Oh my God," she breathed, the words spilling out in disbelief. The realization crashed into her like a wave, forcing her to understand the magnitude of the situation. The mother was gone, and the innocent life beside her was left to face the world alone. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she considered the enormity of what lay before her. Time seemed to stand still in that moment. Clara felt the terror settle in her chest, the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on her. She had been a drifter, always running, but now she was faced with a choice that could change everything. The baby still wailed, seeking comfort, longing for a touch, a connection. The cry pulled at Clara's heart with an urgency that felt electric. "I can't leave you," she whispered to the child, feeling an instinctive need to protect. As she gathered the courage to reach for the baby, she looked at the mother one last time, her lifeless form evoking a potent mix of sorrow and rage. Clara knew all too well the tragic stories that life could carve into existence. With trembling hands, she carefully picked up the baby, cradling the small weight against her chest. The infant's cries softened as it instinctively sought warmth and safety. Clara felt a spark of hope amidst the devastation. Perhaps this tiny being could help her rediscover herself, the compassion buried beneath layers of pain. But the moment quickly turned oppressive. She needed to act. The darkness of the forest began to close in around her, shadows lurking as if watching her every move. Clara glanced around, desperate for a sign, while the weight of the world settled heavily on her shoulders. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier now, blooming with purpose. Holding the baby tightly, she started back down the path she had just traversed, moving away from the darkness that had engulfed them. As she stepped into the open, sunlight poured down, bathing the forest floor in golden light. The warmth felt like a rebirth, and Clara took a deep breath, but the lingering fear clung to her. She needed to find help, a safe place for both of them. The thoughts raced through her mind as she made her way to the clearing ahead. Just beyond the trees, she spotted a small town, quaint and peaceful in contrast to the tragedy she had just witnessed. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as she approached. The sight of people walking with heads held high, living their lives, felt surreal. Could they understand what had happened? Would they help? Or would they turn away, just like the world had turned away from her? The baby shifted in her arms, letting out a soft coo, a momentary pause amidst the chaos. Clara glanced down, and in that fleeting gaze, she saw her hopes reflected back, a future that was still unwritten, a life that could be nurtured and cherished. As she entered the town, her heart raced with uncertainty. The streets were lined with colorful shops and cheerful people, laughter echoing through the air. But in that atmosphere of normalcy, Clara felt like a ghost. She turned a corner, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon her, but she kept moving. There was a diner up ahead, a small establishment with neon lights flickering like fireflies in the twilight. Pushing through the door, a bell chimed, marking her arrival. Heads turned, curiosity navigating through the commotion of cheerful conversations. The air was thick with the aroma of coffee and freshly baked pies, a scent that beckoned to her emptiness. Clara's eyes darted around until they landed on a waitress, an older woman with a kind face, wiping her hands on her apron. The waitress asked, her voice warm, inviting. Clara opened her mouth to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she shifted her weight, revealing the tiny life cradled in her arms. A collective gasp swept through the diner as people turned to look. The waitress asked, eyes widening in disbelief. Clara shook her head, feeling tears welling up. "No," she managed to say, her voice quivering. In that moment, everything that had just happened flooded back. The horror of the forest, the loss of a mother, the helpless cries of a baby. Panic bubbled within her, constricting her chest. Her mother. The words fell softly, heavy and laden with the truth. The waitress's expression shifted, sympathy etching itself across her features. "Oh, honey," she said softly, her eyes glistening with understanding. With a gentle hand, Clara reached out, clutching the baby closer. The warmth radiated from the child, a flicker of hope glowing in the dimness of despair. Clara's voice trembled, vulnerability seeping through as she let the weight of the moment hang heavily like a storm cloud overhead. "Of course," the waitress replied without hesitation, her tone unwavering. "Let's get you both something to eat." The waitress turned to grab a menu, a sense of urgency swirling around her. Clara watched as kindness enveloped her, like a blanket being thrown over her shoulders. She felt a small ripple of relief course through her, but the magnitude of the reality still pressed heavily against her. Would this moment be fleeting, or could it be the beginning of something more, a chance for both of them? As the waitress hustled off, Clara's gaze drifted back to the other customers. In their warm chatter, she caught snippets of their lives' families, laughter, shared stories, as they embraced the simplicity of existence. She felt a longing in her chest, a yearning for connection. Suddenly, the baby cooed softly, pulling Clara from her thoughts. She hadn't realized how tightly she had been holding her breath. The child shifted, reaching out for her finger, a small gesture that stirred something deep within Clara. Fueled by an instinct she hadn't known since her own life had unraveled, she felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. The waitress returned with plates in hand, setting them down on the table with care. "Eat up, sweetie," she said, beaming down at the baby. Clara took a moment to breathe, collecting herself as she watched the waitress walk away. Digging into the food was a revelation. Each bite felt like an awakening, the flavors dancing on her tongue. As hunger began to ease, something she hadn't experienced in too long, Clara's mind raced with what lay ahead. What came next? Would the authorities take the baby away? Would anyone understand her decision to stay with this child, to care for her? In her chest, hope flickered like a candle struggling against the wind, but it grew stronger. Clara couldn't abandon this innocent life. The very act of stepping into the woods had awakened something in her, a drive to protect and nurture. As she wiped a tear from her cheek, a couple at the next booth caught her eye. They exchanged soft whispers, their expressions filled with concern. Clara could see their empathy, an unspoken connection unfolding before her. Feeling the warmth of the community wrapping around her, Clara swallowed hard, her voice steadying as she spoke to the couple. "I found her." The couple shared a glance before the man leaned in slightly. "You did the right thing. We can help." Clara nodded, gratitude blooming within her, messy and real. In that moment, she was no longer a lost drifter. Here she found a semblance of home. The waitress returned, undeterred and full of compassion. "You know," she said, looking down expectantly at Clara, "there's a local charity that helps kids in need." Clara's heart swelled. As the realization settled in, Clara blinked back her tears, a smile creeping onto her face. "You think they'd?" The waitress's smile was infectious, lighting up the whole diner. "Absolutely." The couple at the booth leaned forward, eager to support. The warmth in their eyes folded Clara into the collective spirit. She felt embraced by these strangers, by a kindness that had been absent for too long. After a short while, Clara found herself free of her doubts. She could see a path ahead, an opportunity to create a new existence, to offer this baby a future full of potential and love. As the diner emptied out, the waitress stood beside Clara, her hand resting gently on the baby's head. She said, her tone buoyant. Clara felt the shift inside her, like a flower blooming after a long winter. This was it, a rebirth. With the warmth of relationships forming around her, she could feel fragments of her heart coming together, ready to fight for this tiny life in her arms. The sun dipped below the horizon outside, casting the diner in a warm glow as Clara beamed down at the sleeping baby. In that moment, She knew she would do whatever it took to protect this innocent life. She had faced darkness, but now, standing in the heart of a new community, Clara felt the fire of possibility blaze within her. Today was just the beginning, but she would rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead, with love and strength lighting the way. The baby nestled closer against her and Clara whispered softly, "You're safe now." It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the sun hung lazily in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over everything. Clara, a drifter, wandered through the pines along a winding trail. She had been traveling for weeks, the rugged terrain becoming both a sanctuary and a prison. With every step she sought clarity, hoping somewhere in the distance she would discover a place that felt like home. But just as she thought she'd found a moment of peace, an unexpected sound shattered the calm and urgent, high-pitched cry slicing through the stillness. It was small and desperate, a sound that demanded attention and action. Clara's heart raced, and a jolt of adrenaline surged through her veins. She whispered to herself, turning toward the sound. With cautious steps, she followed the anguished wails, each cry echoing against the trees as though the forest itself was holding its breath. The further she went, the more frantic the cries became, rising and falling like the tide. She stumbled over roots and rocks, pushed through underbrush until she came to a clearing. What she saw next would change everything. There, beneath the shelter of a small thicket, lay a woman motionless as if the very earth had claimed her. Next to her was a small bundle, a crying baby, helplessly reaching out into the void. A cold wave of realization swept over Clara. The woman was dead. Clara's heart plummeted into her stomach, a gut-wrenching sorrow enveloping her, twisting like a knife. The cries of the baby intensified, hopeless in its plea for love and safety. Clara's instincts surged, powerful and unyielding. She whispered. She knelt beside them, each breath heavy, choking back tears as she turned her gaze to the lifeless woman. She could see the faint traces of struggle etched across the mother's face, as if she had fought against the cruel hand of fate. Why? Clara's thoughts raced, trembling with emotion. She was all too familiar with loss, but this was a tragedy that screamed for justice. The baby's cries pierced her heart like a dagger, dragging her back to reality. "I can't leave you," she said, voice breaking as she gently scooped the child into her arms. The moment their eyes locked, everything changed. The baby, with wide, innocent eyes filled with fear, clung to Clara as if recognizing a lifeline in this tangled mess of despair. Clara felt a rush of warmth bloom in her chest, an instinct to protect, to nurture, a feeling she had thought lost. As she cradled the tiny being close, she felt an undeniable connection binding them together. She could sense the life that pulsed in that fragile form, a flicker of hope amidst the darkness that surrounded them. But terror gripped her as she thought about what to do next. Clara had lived a nomadic life, always running, never settling. The idea of stepping into the world of responsibility, especially after witnessing such tragedy, sent waves of anxiety crawling up her spine. Yet she couldn't just turn away, not when the stakes were so high. "Okay, Clara," she said quietly to herself. The weight of the world felt heavy on her shoulders, but she felt the warmth of the baby against her chest, igniting a spark of determination. She stood up, glancing around the clearing, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Time was short, and the forest felt isolating and frightening. With every step, Clara carried the baby close, trying to feel the weight and innocence of life fueling her determination. The path seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, each leaf crunching beneath her feet echoed in her ears like a countdown. What if she didn't find help? What if someone took the baby away from her? As she emerged from the forest, Clara spotted a small town just beyond the trees. The sight of rooftops and smoke billowing from chimneys was both comforting and intimidating. A part of her longed for safety, while another part trembled at the thought of being seen. Drawing in a deep breath, Clara approached the town, instincts heightened, ready to protect the child at all costs. The streets were bustling with life. Families walked hand in hand, children laughed as they played, and the aroma of home-cooked meals wafted through the air. But Clara felt like a ghost, invisible and out of place. She wandered through the streets, scanning for any sign of help. Every passing face seemed to glance her way, some curious, others judgmental. Dumbfounded by the normalcy around her, Clara felt a tightening in her chest, a pang of fear brewing inside her. Then she spotted a diner, its neon lights buzzing like a lifeline. Pushing through the door, a small bell chimed overhead and heads turned in her direction. Clara's heart raced as she took in the cozy atmosphere, the chatter of laughter, the clinking of dishes. But all she could focus on was that baby in her arms and the weight of her promise looming over her. The waitress approached, her warm smile contrasting the cold sweat on Clara's forehead. She asked, her voice full of sincerity. Clara took a shaky breath, feeling exposed as she gently shifted the baby to reveal her face. "I found her," she said, her voice trembling. Waves of emotion coursed through her as she spoke the words. "Her mother is." Gasps filled the diner and time seemed to freeze. The waitress's expression shifted from warmth to shock, compassion flooding her features. She whispered, stepping closer, eyes soft with empathy. "I don't know," Clara stammered, her heart pounding. "I just found her." The weight of her decision descended upon her. This wasn't just a moment with a child she could walk away from. It was a life, a future hanging in the balance. "Let's get you both something to eat. You look like you could use it," the waitress urged, her voice supportive and kind. Clara watched as the waitress moved with a purpose, her demeanor radiating warmth. As she set a cup of coffee and a plate of food in front of Clara, the waitress glanced at the baby. Clara hesitated, the weight of the question crashing into her. "I don't know," she admitted, feeling the chasm of uncertainty beneath her. The waitress stepped back, observing Clara with concern. "We can figure that out together," she replied, determination woven into her words. Clara felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. Perhaps this was a chance to forge a new beginning, not just for the baby, but for herself as well. As Clara took a sip of coffee, the warmth spread through her like a balm, washing away some of the chill that had settled in her bones. She glanced around the diner. Strangers were watching her, their eyes filled with empathy. Each one seemed to carry a silent understanding of the weight on her shoulders. The waitress asked, her tone motherly, filled with concern. Clara echoed, her mind racing. The thought of reaching out was terrifying, but the thought of doing nothing was even more paralyzing. "Yes," the waitress confirmed, her face resolute. "There are places that help in situations like this." As she spoke, Clara saw the truth of her words, the unwavering support of a community ready to rally around a tragedy. With surprising strength, Clara nodded. Okay." The waitress moved quickly, finding a phone book and starting to dial numbers while Clara took a moment to breathe. With the weight of the baby nestled against her chest, she felt a sense of clarity washing over her. This was the universe nudging her toward a new path, a chance to stand together and fight against the darkness. "Hello, yes, we have a situation," the waitress said into the phone, her tone authoritative and reassuring. Clara listened in, anxiety creeping back but tempered by the warmth in the room. As the minutes ticked by, people came and went, the chatter continuing around Clara, but it was as if she was in a bubble, centered on the warmth of the baby in her arms. Hope and fear intertwined, and she found herself breathing deeper with every passing moment. Then the waitress finished the call and turned to Clara, her face brightening with a smile. "They're sending someone over right away. You're going to be okay," she said, her voice brimming with conviction. As Clara absorbed the woman's words, she felt a surge of gratitude rise within her. "Thank you," she managed, fighting back tears. This was a lifeline, a thread to pull her out of the shadows that had enveloped her for so long. A few minutes later, the door to the diner swung open and a woman stepped inside, looking around with purpose. She locked eyes with Clara, and in that moment both fear and relief washed over her. The woman inquired gently. "Yes, that's me," Clara replied, her voice quivering. "I'm here to help," the woman assured her, stepping closer. The warmth in her tone was like a soft hug wrapping around Clara's fear. I don't know yet," Clara admitted, her heart racing. She felt a connection swell within her, a tug towards the tiny life she was now responsible for. "Then let's find the perfect one," the woman replied with a smile, her eyes sparkling with kindness. As they spoke, Clara felt the walls of despair begin to close in on her. This was a new chapter, a chance not just for survival but for healing. Together, they could carve a path through the darkness, creating a future steeped in love rather than loss. With the evening settling around them, Clara felt more at ease. Together, they headed toward the door, and Clara glanced back at the diner, where the waitress was still watching, a supportive smile on her face. "Thank you," Clara breathed, feeling the warmth of gratitude swell within her heart. Exiting the diner, the cool evening air washed over her, mixing with the remnants of hope and fear within her. The baby nestled close as they walked into the night, each step a promise that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. "Let's find you a beautiful name," Clara murmured to the child, a smile creeping onto her lips as possibilities filled the air around them. In that moment, as darkness fell, Clara realized she was no longer just a drifter wandering alone. Together, they would weave their own story, a story filled with resilience, courage, and above all, love. And as they stepped into the unknown future, Clara knew they were both ready to embrace the world anew. The forest was eerily quiet, a hushed lull settling over the path ahead. Clara walked slowly, her thoughts tangled like the underbrush surrounding her. She had been a drifter for so long, always moving, always escaping. But today something felt different. Something in the air stirred her senses. Then, like a sudden clap of thunder, a sound cut through the stillness, a high-pitched wail. It was shrill and desperate, and it pulled at Clara's heartstrings, making her blood run cold. With her heart in her throat, she instinctively turned toward the sound, her legs propelling her forward despite the confusion swirling in her mind. What could it be? As she pressed deeper into the woods, the wails grew louder, more frantic, drowning everything else in a desperate cry for help. Clara's pace quickened, adrenaline coursing through her veins. What she found would change her life forever. In a small clearing, the scene unfolded like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. A woman lay lifeless on the ground, her eyes closed as if she were merely sleeping. But beside her, a tiny bundle squirmed. The baby, no more than a few months old, was clinging to life with every ounce of strength, wailing for its mother. Clara's breath caught in her throat, and a wave of horror crashed over her. "No!" she gasped, stumbling closer. What had happened here? There was a wild desperation in the air, a tension that made her skin crawl. She knelt beside the lifeless woman, her heart thundering in her chest. The baby's cries tore through her like glass, each wail a plea that cut deep into her soul. She saw the woman's face, serene and still, the lines of struggle etched into her skin telling a story of pain and loss. Clara's heart shattered at the sight. She instinctively reached for the baby, lifting it into her arms. The moment their eyes met, a flicker of recognition passed between them, a silent understanding of shared tragedy. With every instinct screaming at her to flee, she couldn't leave. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice trembling as she brushed a tiny finger against the baby's cheek. The baby's cries began to soften, shifting from desperate wails into softer, confused whimpers. But Santiago, the anxiety churned within her, a storm brewing in the pit of her stomach. She had no plan, no idea what to do next. The weight of the world settled heavily on her shoulders, but in that moment all that mattered was the life cradled in her arms. This child was precious and fragile, a beacon of innocence left in the wake of tragedy. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. Clara looked around, panic clawing at her insides. What if someone had hurt them? What if she was too late? The thought of leaving this baby behind was unthinkable. Gathering her strength, she stood up slowly, holding the baby close against her chest. "Hold on," she whispered, determination flooding her as she stepped back onto the path. The woods that had once seemed like a refuge now felt menacing, each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs amplifying her anxiety. She needed help. As she walked, the baby's small body curled against her, seeking warmth and comfort. Clara's heart mended just a little with each gentle coo from the child. But deep down, terror still lingered. What would she do if she couldn't find help? Who would care for this precious life? Emerging from the trees, Clara spotted the outskirts of a small town not far off. The roads were busy with cars passing by, people bustling about their daily lives. Clara hesitated at the edge, considering her next move. She felt like an outsider, a ghost haunting a world that moved on without her. The chirping of birds faded as her heart pounded in her ears, fear mingling with hope. Desperation urged her feet forward. She took a deep breath and ventured into the town, each step feeling heavier as she pushed through her doubts. Clara spotted a diner with a flickering neon sign. It felt like a lifeline amidst the chaos. As she opened the door, a soft chime broke the chatter inside. Heads turned, eyes widened, and Clara felt exposed under their scrutiny. The aroma of coffee and homemade pies wafted through the air, welcoming yet intimidating. A waitress approached, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she caught sight of the baby in Clara's arms. "Oh my God," she said, stepping closer. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, the gravity of the moment flooding back. "I found her," she whispered, her voice faltering. "Her mother." The waitress's eyes softened, an understanding dawning in them as she looked from Clara to the baby. "I can help," she said gently, her voice firm and reassuring. Clara nodded, grateful for the kindness shining in the waitress's gaze. As she took a seat, she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her again. What if the authorities got involved? What if they took the baby away? "Sit tight," the waitress said as she rushed off to grab food. Living in a small town meant people cared for one another, Clara hoped. But this was different. This was a child, and Clara would protect her with everything she had. Moments passed, but the glow from the diners around her felt warm, almost like a blanket wrapped around her. People continued to eat and laugh, carrying on with their lives. But Clara felt like a ship caught in a storm, tossed between fear and the rising desire to take a stand. The waitress returned with a cup of steaming coffee and a plate of warm biscuits. "You need to eat," she said, placing the food before Clara. Clara managed a weak smile, the warmth of food stirring something inside her. She felt a brief flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a way out of this. "Thank you," Clara replied, her voice trembling as she looked at the baby, who was now watching her with wide eyes filled with innocence. She wondered aloud, a sense of curiosity bubbling up through the panic. "She's beautiful," the waitress said softly. Clara savored the word, letting it wash over her. "Hope," she repeated. The baby squirmed slightly in her arms as if responding to the name. Just then, the door to the diner swung open and a man walked in, wearing a uniform that identified him as a local sheriff. Clara's heart dropped. What if he had come to take the baby away? The waitress approached him, and they exchanged words, her gestures indicating Clara and the child. Clara felt her breath hitch as fear clawed at her throat. What would happen next? The sheriff turned, his features stern yet kind. He said as he approached her table, "I've been informed of the situation." Clara opened her mouth to answer, but panic constricted her throat. "No, I found her," she finally managed to say. "Her mother." The sheriff's demeanor softened, his expression transforming from authority to compassion. "I'm sorry to hear that. You did the right thing by bringing her here." Clara's heart dropped again, anxiety surging through her. "No, I can't leave her. I won't let you take her away," she pleaded, tears spilling down her cheeks. His face lined with understanding. "I'm not going to take her from you," he said firmly, raising his hands in a calming gesture. Clara's breath came in shaky gasps as she fought against the urge to pull the baby closer, to shield her from this new reality. What if they separated them? Every fiber of Clara's being screamed against the thought, and a desperate resolve settled in her heart. "I'll take care of her," she asserted, her voice quaking but firm. "I want to keep her." The sheriff studied her, his eyes searching for the truth in her words. "Are you sure?" Clara could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She exclaimed, "I can do it." The tears streamed down her face, but in that moment of vulnerability, Clara also felt a strength within her. The sense of purpose she had been searching for crystallized into focus. She would not walk away. She would stand for this child, for every fleeting moment that mattered. The sheriff took a deep breath, reaching for his radio. "All right," he said slowly. As he spoke, Clara's spirit soared. The battle wasn't over. There were still hurdles to face, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't back down. Days turned into weeks as Clara navigated her new life with hope. In the beginning, it felt overwhelming. The responsibility of caring for a child was heavier than she had anticipated. Yet with every sunrise came new strength. Every giggle from Hope, every coo, filled Clara with warmth, a reminder of the life they were beginning to create together. As the comings and goings of town life continued around them, Clara began to feel like a part of the fabric. She met other mothers who offered support, shared stories, and created a network of love and protection around them both. In the community, she found solace. The inroads she had forged in her emotional journey became an anchor, grounding her fears in compassion and understanding. One afternoon, as Clara watched Hope play in the sunshine, she felt a serene certainty wash over her. She had embraced her role as a protector. She had found purpose. The scars of loss began to fade, replaced by the laughter of a child and the warmth of newfound friendships. "Hope," Clara whispered, looking down at the bright-eyed baby who now lit up her world. "You've changed everything for me. We have a future, and I won't let anything take that away." In that moment, surrounded by laughter and life, Clara realized she was no longer just a drifter. She had settled into being a mother, weaving a new journey with threads of hope, love, and resilience, a testament to the strength born from loss. Together, they formed an unbreakable bond, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as the sun dipped on the horizon, casting golden rays across the land, Clara felt hope bloom anew, a promise of a beautiful life waiting to unfold before them. The future was theirs to write together, page by page, hand in hand. The forest was an eerie whisper of life and death, a place where shadows stretched long and twisted shapes played tricks on the eyes. Clara, a drifter always seeking solace in the untamed wilderness, trudged along a forgotten path, half lost in her own thoughts. As she meandered through the trees, surrounded by the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves, she felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. But just as she began to relax, a sound broke the tranquil spell, a high-pitched wail cutting through the air like a siren. Clara froze. The cry was raw and desperate, echoing from deep within the forest. It was such a haunting sound, wrenching her heart. She hesitated for a moment, fear and curiosity warring in her mind. What could it be? A lost animal, a child? With instinct pushing her forward, she followed the cries, each step harder than the last as a foreboding tension wrapped around her. She ducked under branches and pushed through thick underbrush until she reached a small clearing. What she found there would etch itself into her mind forever. A woman lay lifeless on the ground, her body sprawled awkwardly as if the earth had simply taken her. Clara gasped, her breath caught in her throat, horror flooding her senses. And beside her, a baby swaddled in a dirty blanket, squirming and crying, wide eyes filled with confusion and fear. Clara's heart raced. What had happened here? As she stepped closer, she noticed the woman's face was eerily peaceful, untouched by the chaos around her. An overwhelming wave of sorrow washed over Clara. She knelt beside the mother, her heart breaking for the life lost, but the baby's cries pulled her back to reality. "I can't leave you," she murmured, reaching out tentatively to scoop the child into her arms. As she cradled the small, fragile body against her chest, it quieted slightly, sensing the warmth and safety Clara offered. But the grief of the moment enveloped her, squeezing her heart as she stared at the woman who would never wake again. Clara knew that she couldn't just walk away. The weight of responsibility settled on her like a heavy cloak. It was as if the universe had tied their fates together in that instant. The baby needed her, and Clara needed a purpose. She whispered, feeling utterly lost yet fiercely determined. The stillness of the forest seemed to mock her confusion, the sun filtering through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. She stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the world settle on her shoulders. The baby nestled closer, tiny fingers curling around Clara's shirt as if sensing her resolve. Beneath the horror, a flicker of hope ignited within her. With a small sigh of determination, Clara started back down the path she had just come from. Every step resonated as a promise, a declaration that she would face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were a mismatched pair, a wandering drifter and an orphaned infant bound together by fate. As Clara approached the edge of the forest, the welcoming sight of a small town came into view. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, but there was no peace for her heart. Panic bubbled within her. What would she do when she reached the town? What if they took the baby away from her? The thought threatened to drown her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself as she stepped out of the woods, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The streets were lined with quaint houses, laughter and chatter spilling out from nearby porches. She felt like an outsider, lost in a world that moved too quickly around her. How could she possibly ask for help? Clara spotted a diner on the corner, its neon sign flickering in the twilight like a beacon of hope. Pushing open the door, she stepped inside. The bell above chimed cheerfully, and heads turned toward her. Just then the baby let out a small wail and Clara's heart dropped. All eyes zeroed in on her. A waitress approached, her face kind but with concern written all over it. She asked, eyes falling to the baby's face. The woman's instinctual kindness ignited something deep within Clara, and she swallowed hard, feeling tears pricking at her eyes. "I found her," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible, laden with emotion. "Her mother." The waitress's expression shifted, and Clara could see the compassion blossom there. "Oh my God," she said, stepping closer. Clara hesitated for a moment, holding the baby tightly, but the waitress's gentle demeanor soothed her. As she handed the baby over, Clara felt an ache in her chest, a mixture of grief and relief. The waitress inspected the child, her brow furrowing in concern. "We need to get her some help," she said. "You're doing the right thing." Clara nodded, letting the warmth of the moment comfort her. The waitress guided her to a booth in the back, and Clara sank down, heart racing. The baby had quieted, staring up at her with wide eyes as if seeking reassurance. How fragile they both were, caught in a world that felt so unkind. The waitress returned with a plate of steaming food and a cup of coffee. "Eat up," she urged. Clara stared down at the food, warmth radiating from the plate, but she could hardly consume anything as thoughts raced through her mind. They needed to get to a shelter, somewhere safe where the baby could be cared for. But what if they took her away? The fear tightened Clara's throat. She couldn't let that happen. While she wrestled with her anxieties, the diner was busy with laughter and chatter, families enjoying their meals, living lives that felt so different from hers. She felt alone amidst the warmth, like a ghost haunting a world that didn't know the depths of her loss. Just then the door swung open and in walked a local sheriff, uniform pristine, exuding an air of authority. Clara's heart sank as he scanned the room, his eyes landing on her. Her breath quickened. This was the moment she dreaded. Would he take the baby away? The sheriff approached her booth, his expression serious yet compassionate. "Ma'am, we've been notified about the situation," he said gently, but Clara's panic surged. "It's not like that," she interrupted, the words spilling out in a rush. "I found her." "Calm down," the sheriff said, holding up his hands. "That's not what we're here to do." As Clara looked into his eyes, she could see sincerity, but the fear gripped her tightly. She asked, her voice trembling, "What if you separate us?" "I can't. We need to ensure her safety, and we can do that together," he replied, as the waitress chimed in with agreement. Every instinct told Clara to grab the baby and run, but there was also a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a way to protect the child while finding them both a safe harbor. "Okay," she breathed, feeling the weight of the world slide from her shoulders just a little. The sheriff radioed for assistance while Clara tried to steady her breathing. She felt the warmth of the diner envelop her, the sense of community filling the gaps where fear had settled. The waitress stayed by her side, a steadying presence as they waited for word from the local authorities. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Clara stared out the window, watching the sun dip lower, casting an orange hue over the town. She was lost in thought when the baby stirred in her arms, a gentle coo making her look down. The child's innocent gaze sparkled with trust, and Clara felt her heart swell with determination. Finally, the sheriff returned with a woman who approached with warmth in her eyes. "Hello, I'm Angela," she said, extending a hand. "I work with family services." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Could this be the lifeline they needed? She asked, her voice trembling. "We want to make sure you both have what you need and that baby gets the best care," Angela said gently. Clara blurted out, urgency tightening her voice. "I want to keep her. I can care for her." Angela's eyes glimmered with understanding. "All right." Feeling a mix of relief and determination, Clara nodded. A path had opened before her, and she wouldn't shy away. From that moment, she became a warrior in her newfound mission, promising herself and the baby that they would create a life filled with love and possibility. As days turned into weeks, the small diner became a second home for Clara and Hope, the name she had chosen for the baby nestled in her arms. With the community's support, Clara started to feel a sense of stability. Friendships blossomed, and moments of joy filled even the hardest days. They were a family forged in adversity, a bond that transcended the sorrow that had brought them together. Clara learned to nourish her body and soul, taking small steps to reclaim her life, while hope thrived and grew strong, filling every day with laughter and light. What had begun as a deep tragedy blossomed into an unexpected journey of love and resilience, proving that even in the darkest times, hope could thrive. Together, they would write their story, one filled with love, strength, and an unshakable bond that would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The future stretched out infinitely before them, a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of a new life. And as they moved forward hand in hand, Clara knew that they had both found something precious, a home in each other. In the heart of an untamed forest where shadows danced with the wind, a soft yet desperate sound broke the serene silence, the cry of a baby. Clara, a drifter wandering from place to place, felt that haunting wail latch onto her very soul, yanking her from the depths of her own thought. She wondered, instinctively drawn toward the noise. With every step, a sense of urgency took hold, propelling her deeper into the trees. She had lived a life chasing solace, but now she felt a strange pull, like destiny nudging her forward. The cries, small yet potent, echoed with a desperate need. After a few more strides, Clara broke through the last line of trees into a clearing. The sight that met her stole her breath away. A woman lay motionless on the ground, surrounded by underbrush, her face peaceful yet unsettlingly still. And beside her, swaddled in a thin blanket, a baby squirmed, tears streaming down its cheeks, calling out for a mother who would never respond. Clara's heart dropped. She staggered forward, the world around her fading into a blur. "No, no, no," she whispered, kneeling beside the woman. The sight was horrific and beautiful all at once. It was clear that the woman had fought hard. The struggles of her life were etched into her face. But standing in that clearing, Clara couldn't dwell on the past. She had to focus on the here and now. "Oh God," she murmured, reaching out to take the baby in her arms. The moment she held the tiny life against her chest, everything shifted. The cries subdued to soft whimpers, as if sensing the connection forged between them. "I won't leave you," Clara promised, her voice thick with unshed tears. In that moment, she felt the raw, undeniable bond of motherhood blossoming inside her. She had been a drifter for too long, the weight of loss clinging to her like a second skin. But this was different. This child was a spark of hope, a chance for redemption. But what now? Clara looked around the clearing, a wave of panic washing over her. The forest felt like a cage, closing in as the reality of the situation pressed down on her. She had no idea what had happened to the baby's mother, but one thing was clear: the child needed help. Taking a deep breath, Clara stood up, cradling the baby close to her breast. Time felt more pressing than ever. The sun was slipping lower in the sky, and she would have to navigate back through the woods. "Stay with me. We're going to be okay," Clara whispered, summoning the strength that had always kept her alive. As Clara retraced her steps through the forest, her mind raced. What if she called someone? But the thought of strangers getting involved, of someone taking the baby away, filled her with dread. All her life, she had run from authority, from a society that threatened to judge her, to imprison her. She could barely breathe, fear wrapping around her heart like a vice. Emerging from the trees, Clara spotted the outline of a small town on the horizon. It felt alien and safe all at once. People moved about, their laughter and chatter breaking through her anxiety. But as she stepped closer, it felt like a different world, a place where she might be turned away. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat reminding her of the tiny life she held. What if they didn't understand? What if they thought she was unfit? Just then, another cry escaped the baby's lips, jagged and raw, compounding her worries. Clara clutched the child closer and forged ahead, determination mingled with fear. The diner came into view, its neon sign flickering like a beacon of hope. It beckoned her closer, and she pushed through the door, her heart racing. A bell chimed overhead, and heads turned in her direction. Clara felt suddenly exposed, the weight of every gaze pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. A waitress asked, her voice filled with warmth and concern as she approached, Clara hesitated, then opened her mouth, but words failed her. Instead, she shifted the baby, her tiny face now peeking out from the blanket. "I found her," Clara said finally, the words spilling out in a rush. "Her mother." Gasps filled the diner, disbelief rippling through the patrons. The waitress took a step closer, her eyes softening with empathy. "Oh my God," she said, clutching Clara's arm. Clara was taken aback by the sincerity in the woman's tone. She felt her heart swell, a flicker of hope igniting in the dense fog of fear. Clara's voice trembled, a mix of desperation and relief. "Let's get you both something to eat first," the waitress suggested, glancing down at the baby. Clara nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, gratitude washing over her like a warm wave. As the waitress hurried off, Clara sank into a booth, holding the baby close, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavily in the air. The sense of coffee and fried food enveloped her, a reminder of comforting normalcy, but Clara felt less than normal. She cradled the baby, feeling the warmth radiate from her small body. The mere act of holding her ignited something within Clara, a protective instinct that grew fiercer with every heartbeat. Minutes later, the waitress returned, setting a steaming plate of food down in front of Clara. "Eat," she said firmly but kindly. Clara felt the warmth of the food, but her mind was still tumultuous, her heart heavy with worry. Clara asked, her voice low as panic crept back in. The waitress's expression softened and she shook her head. "No one's taking her." As Clara took a tentative bite, she felt the bite of fear begin to dissolve, replaced by a flicker of resolve. The connection between her and the baby was unmistakable, and it ignited a fire deep within her, a determination to protect this child at all costs. Just then, the door swung open and a local sheriff entered, his uniform crisp and tidy. Clara's heart sank instantly. The weight of her fears returned, stronger than before. Would he take the baby? Would he deem her unfit to care for a child? He strode over, his expression serious but not unkind. He asked, glancing around the diner. Clara clenched her jaw, her stomach churning. I found her," she stuttered, looking down at the baby nestled in her arms. "Her mother is." The sheriff nodded, his tone shifting gently. "I understand. We need to ensure the baby gets taken care of." With those words, Clara's breath hitched, a mixture of fear and relief coursing through her. "I can take care of her," she insisted, meeting his gaze. "Let's take a moment," he replied gently. As he spoke, Clara felt her heart race in her chest. "Please," she begged, her voice wavering. "I can't lose her." The sheriff's demeanor softened further. "I'm not here to take her," he reassured her. "I only want to ensure she's safe." Clara's heart swelled with gratitude, though uncertainty loomed just out of reach. After a lengthy discussion, Clara found herself more at ease. The sheriff's kindness and understanding offered a lifeline, a way out of the darkness that had enveloped her. Through everything, the fear, the unknown, Clara began to realize something monumental. She wouldn't walk away. Determination washed over her, strong and fierce. They would face this together. And so began a new chapter. Days turned into weeks and Clara settled into her role as a caretaker. She named the baby Hope, a reflection of what she represented in Clara's life, the chance to rebuild, to forge a path toward healing. Hope's laughter filled the tiny room they shared, and Clara found herself smiling more often than not. Slowly but surely, she began to notice the changes within herself. She was no longer just a drifter. She had become a protector, a mother. And the bond forged in that clearing took on a life of its own, blossoming into something beautiful and new. Their little home soon filled with color and warmth, decorations made from found objects and simple joys. Clara forged friendships with the townsfolk, each connection easing the burdens of isolation she had carried for so long. In time, she learned to celebrate life again, but shadows still remained. The pain of the past lingered just beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the harsh realities she had fled. But with every giggle from Hope, with every day spent in laughter and discovery, Clara found the strength to face that pain head-on. One day, as they strolled through the town for groceries, she caught sight of a familiar face, a woman who had helped her in the diner. Their eyes met and Clara felt an electric connection sparking between them. "Clara," the waitress asked, genuine warmth lighting her features. "Really good," Clara replied, her voice steady, reflecting the love she felt for Hope. Good, that baby is a joy, the woman smiled, glancing down at Hope, who cooed happily in Clara's arms. Clara beamed, a wave of gratitude washing over her. Together, they found laughter again, reveling in the simple moments that life had to offer, the joy of friends gathered around as the sun set in hues of orange and purple. Clara was no longer wandering alone, no longer lost. Every new day brought new challenges, but also new treasures. There was warmth where there had been cold, laughter where once there had been tears. In the little town that had once seemed foreign, Clara found her place, a home forged from the ashes of tragedy. The baby reached up, her small fingers curling around Clara's hand. And in that moment, sharing in the joy of connection, Clara felt a promise settle between them, a vow that not only would they survive, they would thrive together. In the days that followed, Clara continued to cascade through life, the scars of her past healing under the light of love. The protection she felt for Hope was fierce and unwavering. They were a team, navigating the highs and lows, and Clara discovered a strength she had never known existed within her. Together, they built a life steeped in resilience, a testament to the transformative power of love and the unimaginable capacity of the human heart. Clara had once feared the loss of everything, but now, standing in the warmth of a new beginning, she realized that something beautiful had emerged from the rubble. Hope was not just a name. Hope was a life. In the heart of the woods, amidst sorrow and loss, Clara had chosen to refuse to leave, and in doing so, had rewritten the very essence of her own story. The forest was thick with silence, the kind that wraps around you like a heavy cloak, making each sound feel amplified. Clara shuffled along a narrow trail, her worn boots crunching softly on the gravel beneath her feet. She had been a drifter for so long, seeking solace in the vast wilderness that echoed her own feelings of isolation and uncertainty. Today was just another day, or so she thought. But then, a sound sliced through the stillness, a sharp, desperate cry that set Clara's heart racing. It was a piercing wail, jagged and raw, echoing through the trees like an alarm ringing in the night. Her breath caught in her throat and instinct took over. She stepped off the path, propelled by a mixture of dread and curiosity, her heart thundering in her chest. With each hurried step, the cries grew louder, pulling her deeper into the unknown. She pushed through the underbrush, the branches clawing at her clothes, the weight of anxiety pressing down on her. She murmured, each word a prayer. When she broke through the trees into a small clearing, the sight that met her eyes felt like a punch to the gut. A woman lay on the ground, her body still, eyes closed as if she were merely resting. But the truth hit Clara like a wave crashing against the shore. This woman would never wake again. Beside her, a tiny bundle squirmed in the dirt, a baby, screaming with a desperation that cut through Clara's heart. "No," Clara gasped, her hands trembling as she knelt beside the scene. The baby's cries echoed in her ears, igniting panic and sorrow all at once. How could anyone leave a child in such a horrific situation? Clara could feel the tears welling up, the gravity of the moment pressing heavily on her chest. There was no time to waste. Clara reached down, gently cradling the baby in her arms. The moment their eyes met, a jolt of connection surged between them. The baby's wide eyes looked back at Clara, flooded with confusion and fear. Clara's heart twisted painfully, a fierce determination rising within her. "You're not alone," she whispered, feeling like she'd stumbled into the depths of a nightmare while holding a fragile spark of life. 1,000 questions raced through her mind. What had happened to the mother? Where were they? Clara rose slowly, cradling the child against her chest. She needed to get out of the woods, away from the stillness that threatened to swallow her whole. "Hold on tight," she murmured, stepping back towards the path. The sunlight filtered through the trees, painting the ground in patterns of light and shadow. With each step, Clara felt a strange mixture of adrenaline and fear coursing through her. She could hear the soft whimpers of the baby, the need for safety palpable in the air. When Clara emerged from the tree line, a small town stretched out before her. Homes lined the streets, the sounds of normalcy blending together in a surreal harmony. People moved about, seemingly unaware of the darkness that lingered just beyond their world. The sight felt overwhelming. Would they understand? Would they help? Avoiding the gazes of strangers, Clara hurried down the cracked pavement, clutching the baby tightly. She couldn't shake the dread pooling in her stomach, the fear that someone might take her away. She had no home, no support, just a life she had been running from and this tiny being that had instantly become her everything. Just ahead, a diner glowed, its neon sign flickering like a lighthouse in the stormy sea of her emotions. Pushing through the door, she was enveloped in warmth, the scent of coffee and frying food filling the air. But as Clara stepped inside, every pair of eyes turned toward her, curiosity flickering in their gazes. The din of conversation quieted, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. A waitress with a kind smile approached her, concern replacing the curiosity on her face as she noticed the baby squirming in Clara's arms. I found her," Clara stammered, gripping the child tighter. "Her mother." Gasps filled the diner, disbelief woven into the very fabric of the air. The waitress's eyes softened, compassion flooding her features. "Oh my God," she said, gently stepping closer. Clara hesitated but instinctively felt she could trust this woman. Carefully, she handed the baby over, her heart racing with fear and hope intertwined. The waitress inspected the child, her expression shifting from shock to determination. "We need to get her some help," she said firmly. Clara could barely process the words. She nodded, following the waitress to a booth in the corner, her heart pounding as she sank down. The weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. She could still feel the sting of loss and confusion in her chest. As Clara sat there, the waitress brought a plate of food and a steaming cup of coffee. "You need to eat," she urged, setting the baby back in Clara's arms. The baby cooed softly, and Clara felt the warmth radiate from her small body. Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. The waitress asked gently, her eyes full of understanding. "The authorities, you're safe here, we just want to help." As Clara began to eat, the tension within her slowly began to dissipate. She stared at the tiny face snuggled against her, overwhelmed by both fear and love. The waitress stayed close, taking a seat across from her. She asked, "I didn't even think of that," Clara admitted, a bittersweet smile creeping onto her face. The waitress nodded knowingly. Clara took a deep breath, feeling an unexpected lightness around her as if hope was beginning to blossom. "Hope," she finally said, gazing down at the baby. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Clara began to share her story, her voice trembling with emotion. The warmth of the diner wrapped around her like a blanket, making her feel less alone. When she had finished, the waitress looked at Clara with genuine compassion. "You've shown incredible strength," she said softly. Clara felt tears prick the corners of her eyes as gratitude poured through her. "Thank you." But just then the door to the diner swung open and in walked a man in a uniform, the sheriff. Clara's heart sank. What would he want? Would he take hope away? He approached the booth, his demeanor calm. "Ma'am, I've been informed of the situation." Clara's throat tightened, panic rising. "No, I found her. I can take care of her, please." The sheriff's gaze softened, understanding flickering in his eyes. "I'm not here to take her from you. I just need to know that you can provide for her." Clara's pulse quickened. "I can." The sheriff nodded slowly as if weighing her words. "Let's discuss what that means," he said. As Clara inhaled deeply, a sense of determination surged within her. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, and no one would take this tiny life from her. Over the next weeks, Clara struggled but persevered day by day as they forged an unlikely bond. Hope thrived under Clara's care, and with the community's support, Clara began to build a life they could share. As days turned to weeks, the challenges became easier to navigate. The diner filled with laughter and love, and Clara found a sense of normalcy she thought she had lost forever. Each smile from Hope filled Clara's heart, softening the edges of her past, but shadows still lingered. Clara often found herself haunted by nightmares, the image of the mother lying lifeless on the ground, the cries of the baby pulling her back into that dark moment. She fought to push those memories away, but they held a tenacious grip on her heart. One night, as Clara tucked Hope into bed, the weight of her emotions crashed down upon her. She couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked just beyond the door, that darkness would invade the light they had built together. The next day, as Clara was preparing to head out for groceries, her heart raced with anticipation. Suddenly, a knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. She opened it to find the sheriff standing there, his face serious. Clara's heart sank. He asked, stepping inside without waiting for a response. The weight of his presence filled the room, and Clara felt a knot of anxiety twist in her chest. She asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," he said, his gaze unwavering. Panic surged through Clara. "What do you mean?" The sheriff took a breath, steeling himself. "There are reports about her mother." The world around Clara began to spin. "What do you mean, I found her?" His eyes softened. "I understand, but we have to ensure that she's safe." Clara's heart pounded fiercely against her ribcage. "Harm her? Why, who?" "Calm down," he urged, raising his hands in a placating manner. "We just want to keep her safe." In that moment, as fear wrapped its icy fingers around her heart, Clara felt the foundations of her new life begin to tremble. She had fought so hard to create a sanctuary, and now that sanctuary felt like it was slipping away. Around her, the walls seemed to close in. "Tell me what I need to do," Clara demanded, her voice shaking with determination. "I'll help. I'll do anything." "Stay strong," the sheriff said, his tone firm yet compassionate. "We'll get through this together." Clara's heart raced as she gazed at him, a mixture of fear and determination simmering within her. She faced her greatest challenge yet, not only to protect Hope from the dangers of a world that had already tried to tear them apart, but also to confront the darkest corners of their past. Just then, the baby let out a soft coo, drawing Clara's attention. Hope, innocent and blissful, reminded Clara of everything worth fighting for. She clenched her fists, setting her jaw. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady now. And in that moment, as the weight of the unknown pressed down on them, Clara stood at the precipice of a new journey, a journey that would test her strength, her resolve, and ultimately, the very bonds of love that had formed in the face of tragedy. But as she looked down at Hope, she knew that whatever lay ahead, she could no longer run. They would face it together, come what may.